Here is a quick walkthrough of the data that was shared by Brighton College and what this could look like within a Qualtrics dashboard. So the first thing to note about Qualtrics dashboards is they are role-based. In other words, anyone within your organization who should have access to the data to make improvements, you can give them access through these dashboards. In other words, you could have an executive view with an aggregate of all of the surveys, all of the insights coming from your pupil, your parent and your staff surveys. But you might also have this at a regional level, and obviously at the regional level, those directors will only have access to the data from their specific region, and very often we'll see a school level dashboard as well. This is likely to be far less detailed, but really focusing on the high level insights and where you can make improvement at the school level. These dashboards are also in real time, so technically within a few moments of that data being captured, it can already be accessible to each of those leaders. Now, there's a number of ways you can share these dashboards. We highly recommend that you share the live dashboard so people can get access to things like filters, and that they're highly dynamic. And you'll see a lot of amazing AI features that hopefully can add a lot of value as well. But of course, you can share by just emailing out a PDF as well. And you could do this on a regular basis. So do it on the first Monday of every month, for example. So there's lots of things that you can do here in terms of ensuring that people have access to this data. So in terms of reviewing this data, I think the other thing to note is just that we're not just looking at what is happening, and hopefully what you'll see today is how we can help you focus on some of the key action areas where you can be confident that you're going to have an impact on outcomes. So with your pupil data, let's have a look through some of the insights that we can garner here. Now, typically when we go through this data, we want to understand key headlines, first of all. So for example, you have a question here about whether you're likely to recommend Brighton College, and you might want to also see your sample size, how this breaks down across gender. We can also see this broken down across year, and actually I've just set this up so we want to not just look at the student year and response rates, but actually how does this break down in terms of whether a student is likely to recommend Brighton College or not. And an interesting trend here is that we're seeing that for our year 9, our year 8 students, there is a more considerable proportion of students who would say that they do not recommend Brighton College to friends. Now, noticing that we have a trend here, we might want to understand this a little bit further. And I just want to highlight one of the features here, an AI feature that is built within the dashboards. Essentially, it's a feature that allows you to do things like executive summaries. And I've just prompted the AI to pick out all of the key drivers of whether students would recommend Brighton College. In other words, it's looking through all of your data, it's interpreting that data, and it's summarising in a way that's very easy to understand. Now, this is the kind of executive summary that sometimes an analyst might build out for you. It would require them to do a bit of analysis and kind of come up with this. This takes a lot of time generally. And if you imagine this across each of your dashboard viewers, so if you think about your stakeholders at the school level, at the regional level, if you were to build out that executive summary each time, it's going to take a lot of work. But already the AI is doing this for you. So based on this prompt that I've set up here, and you can change this very easily yourself, I've just asked what are the key drivers that I should focus on, specific to whether students would recommend Brighton College. And it's highlighting here that there are a lot of drivers, some that are going very well, so students feel cared for, there's effective handling of bullying, but there are things that are maybe not going so well, and we know that have a big impact on whether someone's likely to recommend Brighton College. So things like enjoying learning, quality of teaching, etc. Now, one thing that's very powerful with this is it isn't just a static executive summary. Knowing that we have a specific trend, that there are year 8, year 9 students, what if I want to drill down and understand this specifically? So I'm just taking some filters. You can choose what kind of filters you want to apply here yourselves. They're very easy to build out. But I'm going to just select our year 8 and year 9 students. And I can also see that this executive summary is going to update specifically, focusing on the drivers for this group of students. Now, As this updates, you can also see the rest of the dashboard has updated accordingly as well. So we can see specific for this group of students, there are things around feeling listened to, teachers' passion for students, etc., which you can get into a lot of detail here as well. So this is just one of the many AI features built within the platform to help you get the best quality insight, and more importantly, to lead you towards action without having to take a lot of analyst time to get you there. Okay, so let's go down further and get a more holistic view of what's going on in terms of students. Now, just to highlight, if you want to get a more detailed view, I've just created a traffic light based system here. So looking at each of the drivers, so all of the questions that you asked within your survey, for each of the years. So those that you asked for in terms of the junior school, so foundation stage to year 4, and then for your senior school as well. But using these kind of features, I can understand where we have some trends, where we have some experience gaps. And we can see that where things are rated more positively at the foundation stage at year 1, those scores tend to drop quite a bit in the slightly older years, so year 2 to year 4. And we can even see some trends. So for example, when it comes to things like getting on with your colleagues or sorry, getting on with your fellow pupils. In other words, do you think that children in your class are kind? While this seems to be going quite well at the year 1, year 2 stage, it drops quite dramatically when we get to older stages. And maybe this is something you want to dig deeper on when it comes to where you need to make improvements. So, as I mentioned, one of the key things about Qualtrics is helping you to focus on where to take action. So in other words, we don't look at just the data, the descriptive data in terms of what is going on. We want to understand why that's happening and more importantly, where you can take action. And this is where we can do things like build in key drivers or focus areas. So again, this is highlighting where things are going well. In other words, from the questions that we asked, as we hover over, we can see things like where we asked whether students feel like they're making good progress. Generally, they're quite happy with this. In other words, they give us high scores. They're satisfied with this. But at the same time, it's not really something that's important. It's not really correlated with whether someone's likely to recommend Brighton College. We can see the areas where students are less happy. So, having a range of school activities, finding challenge within their lessons. These are rated less well, but again are not really driving whether someone's likely to recommend Brighton College. The areas that we should be focusing on are things like the quality of teaching. So this is something that's rated less well, but it's also something that is correlated or highly impactful on things like whether someone's likely to recommend. Now, this is just an example. I pulled in this as an outcome, but maybe you want to look at this in terms of whether someone feels safe within the school, whether they feel that the quality is good, so the quality of teaching is positive. Now, where this is really impactful is, let's say I want to focus on a very specific group. So again, maybe we're focusing on our year 9 students. And all of this can update in real time. So actually, when we look at this, there's even bigger correlations. So things like behaviour, staff are respectful. There's a lot of things around teacher relationships that seem to be a key focus area for this specific group of students. So we're getting a direction in terms of where we should be focusing. Now, to get deeper on this, we could leverage this alongside open text insights. So this is where we get really rich insight. It's essentially taking that verbatim from those open text boxes within a survey. It's applying AI to do things like sentiment analysis, emotion analysis, and it's also doing things like topic analysis. So it's recommending certain topics that you should be focusing on as well. However, you can also bring in your own topics if you want to look at that as well. So it's very flexible. Now, in this case, we want to focus on, let's say, educators and teachers. So this is something that came up as a key driver for this group of students. Now, we can see this is generally quite negative as well. When we drill down further, we can see the kind of things that are coming up here. So overall teacher feedback, It's related to things like tutoring, tutors, teacher, instructors, etc. Now we can drill down further. When we do, we can see that it isn't just something that has negative sentiment, but it's related to things like anger, enjoyment. So both positive both high emotion intensity and low emotion intensity in terms of enjoyment. And we can also see things like actionability. And what we mean by actionability is whether something is more urgent or not, whether a response is needed or whether it's merely a suggestion. So a response needed would be, let's say there's more kind of urgent language. So maybe there's a lot of exclamation marks. Maybe there's an expectation in the text that someone should follow up. So I'm having this issue. I wish someone would follow up with me on this. This is something that's going to be tagged as response needed. Suggestion is something like, I'd really like to, if we could improve this, I would suggest, etc. And obviously, some of this is going to be a little bit more neutral, where neither suggestion or response is needed. But again, we can filter down on these as we wish as well. Okay. So now we're dealing with quite a small sample size here, just because I've really kind of drilled down. If you wish, you can also put things like confidentiality thresholds on this as well. So in other words, if you don't want to get past a certain point, maybe 5 or 6 students in a group, we can restrict this. So if you continue to filter down, it'll just appear as blank, essentially. Now we can see specifically that the verbatim that's related to here. So I think the key point here is not just that we can highlight where we have key areas to focus on using things like key driver analysis, but we can even get down to the detail in terms of where this is coming from. What are the trends in terms of sentiment for different groups of pupils, how this breaks down in terms of emotion and the urgency of some of these comments. And we can do this essentially within a number of clicks. Now, alongside this, you might just want to get a summary of all of the data that's coming in here as well. Think about it less from an analytical lens, where you're kind of drilling down further. And while that's very valuable, you might just want to get an overall view of generally what are some of the comments that are coming up here. And this is built on another AI feature that Qualtrics has built out. So it's specifically built for summarization of open text comments. So in this case, we can see that for our pupils, when we ask a question about whether they're likelihood to recommend, we could see generally the key thing that's coming up is praise for academic quality. And this is balanced by concerns over behaviour, etc. Okay, so this essentially is breaking this out. So it's highlighting some of the key topics. So things like quality of education, and we can see what people are talking about here. And it's even bringing this out. It's even relating this back to the exact verbatim where this has come up as well. So when we talk about school environment, people improve like the welcoming, inclusive school environment. And you can see some of the key topics that are coming up here, and this is exactly where it's driven from. Now, one thing I want to highlight, so you'll very often get this kind of feedback, particularly from students, often from parents as well. So it's very good. So that's not very actionable. And this is something I want to return to in a few minutes when we go through how we can maximize the quality of data that you're getting from students. So things that we can do within the survey to get even better responses. But let's go back to think about this from an analytical perspective. So we've gone from understanding the magnitude of the issue, how it breaks down across different groups of students. We can even see some of the key action areas, and then get the full detail by leveraging things like text analytics. There's a lot of features within the platform that help us to understand this data even better. Now, a final feature I want to highlight within this. So let's say you have a question about the data. We have what we call our Qualtrics Assist here. And this is like a chatbot that's built within the dashboard. Now, it's different to a ChatGPT. So it isn't just that we can upload the data and then you can ask all sorts of questions. Qualtrics has trained the AI to think about best practices in terms of experience management. We obviously have a lot of benchmarks within this. So we've worked with within the experience management space, so customer experience for over 25 years, we can leverage a lot of this data to help organizations understand their data better. But what does this mean for you? Well, whether you're at the school level and whether you're at the leadership level, you can have access to this feature, and you can start asking questions such as, what should I focus on to, let's say, improve relationship with teachers? Okay, so what is happening here, based on this very custom question that I've asked, it's going to pick out some of the key areas here. So things like communication, teacher engagement. So it's looking at the data, it's interpreting it, and helping you understand it better. And it's also going to highlight where this is coming from as well, so you can be sure and verify this if needed. So again, it's a way of almost having an analyst sit with you in a room and tell you where you should be focusing. Now, just to highlight in terms of this feature, so the first wave of this feature is that it's going to summarize things like open text comments for you. But over time, and in the coming months, you should be able to ask even more in-depth questions. So how can I improve my NPS, or my likelihood to recommend? What are the key drivers for year 9, etc. All of this, Qualtrics will look at not just the qualitative data, but the quantitative data, and help you make sense of this in a really easy way. So it's a really powerful feature, and I think that a really good application of this is when you think about schools, etc. So maybe we're talking about school administrators don't necessarily have an analyst background. We want to help them get to insights really fast and give them the guidance in terms of where to be focusing as well.